What a week in cricket it's been. Controversy, it's back on the front pages, and I talk, of course, of the ball tampering incident with Sachin Tendulkar in the series between India and South Africa. And joining me in the studio, senior commentator Tony Greig, and well, I thought all the controversy had gone away, but it's back.
It is. It's well and truly back in South Africa. Obviously, Tendulkar is a touchy subject whenever you say anything detrimental, especially in the eyes of Indians. And there is a report today that the Indians want to go home. They are very disturbed at having so many of their players involved and none of the South Africans.
Well, before we get into an in-depth look at it, let's just remind our viewers at home about how this week has unfolded. Here's Andrew Voss to tell us more.
This is the vision that has ignited cricket's latest controversy. Sachin Tendulkar shown running his fingers along the seam of the ball on day 3 of the second test against South Africa. It was enough to convince match referee Mike Dennis that Tendulkar was guilty of ball tampering. The result, a suspended one-test ban and the loss of 75% of his match fee. The verdict was delivered at a fiery Day 5 press conference. Dennis attended, but refused to answer questions from reporters.
ICC regulation for me as a match referee that I cannot talk about the decisions that I make. It's out of my hands completely.
But journalists persisted, demanding Dennis outline the reasons behind his decision.
If he cannot answer, somebody has to, because you have called us for a press conference. I think we are entitled to get answers.
My question is, if Mike Dennis is not going to answer any questions, what is he doing here? We know what he looks like.
In all, Dennis fined and suspended 6 Indian players for their actions during the match. Captain Sourav Ganguly didn't escape punishment. He received a suspended sentence covering 1 test and 2 one-day matches for failing to control his players.
Not out. He's going for pad first, but he was playing a shot outside off stump. That's the umpire telling him it's outside off stump. Stop shouting. You're spoiling my day.
3 players, Shiv Sundardas, spinner Harbhajan Singh and wicketkeeper Deep Dasgupta, were found guilty of dissent and intimidating the umpire by charging. They've been fined 75% of their match fees and received a suspended 1-test ban. A 4th player, Virender Sehwag, was found guilty on the same charge, but his 1-test suspension is effective immediately. The excessive appealing charge ignited further anger from Indian reporters, one suggesting Sean Pollock's 2 sustained and eventually successful appeals were no less intimidating than those of Sehwag.
He doesn't have to answer if he doesn't feel like, but please record it and convey it to all concerned that it's a totally biased decision and one-sided. And some great conspiracy is playing, we are saying. Not that we are coming from India, it's been happening over the years, this is one more.
Meanwhile, some commentators move quickly to defend Tendulkar.
Not Sachin Tendulkar. Never, ever, ever.
He received little support, however, from Aussie captain Steve Waugh.
If he's picked the seam, then he's got to pay the penalty, like everyone else. It shouldn't be any favours just because of your reputation and the way you play the game. If you do something wrong, then you've got to get pulled up for it. And I think it's been going on too long. The ball tampering, affecting the state of the ball, and it's about time people started paying the penalty.
And in Waugh's mind, a suspended sentence isn't enough.
It's more a warning than a penalty. It's unless you get a ban, it's not really a penalty. I guess it's a smear on your reputation, which is pretty severe. But I think if they're going to do it properly, you may as well go the full way and make an issue of it. There's a ball there and there's a bat, and that's a contest. And if you alter either of those, you shouldn't be playing. It's pretty simple, I think.
Indian players have threatened to boycott the 3rd test unless Dennis is replaced or the ban's lifted. An ICC ruling is expected later today.
Yeah, well, fresh news we can say is Mike Dennis will be the match referee in the next test.
If the test takes place, that's what's happened. I mean, basically, the Indians said remove him, and the ICC have said, sorry, we can't do that. And I think I probably agree with the ICC. However, I've just spoken to Jagu Dalmia, who's the boss of Indian cricket and a very powerful man in world cricket, And he tells me he's got a real problem now. He's got a problem in so much as his board are not convinced that they should stay there. He also thinks that this will have to go to government. In that part of the world, things work just a little differently. A lot of people who have a lot to do with cricket don't quite understand how they work in India. But those of us who've had some time over there understand that things do work a little differently. So government could get involved here. And my information is that the players are disturbed. They want out of the place. They feel they have been victimised. I've got to say that I think that Mike Diness would probably, and I know him very well, would have probably put these guys on notice for excessive appealing and said, look, cut it out right before the series and indeed perhaps even during the first test match. So as far as that side of it's concerned, I can understand it's probably taken a few stages for him to actually get to this point of banning them. Just looking at the Tendulkar footage though, I cannot believe, I saw Ravi Shastri standing up there, I heard boycott. I cannot believe that anyone who sees that footage could possibly defend him.
Well, I think also in that, he's had about 3 cracks at it. He's got basically right around the ball. Now, you know, occasionally you might build a defence that, you know, I was cleaning the seam. With the pressure on his fingernail, the way he was rolling that ball around, he can't be cleaning the seam.
Normally when you clean the seam, you look at it. You've got to see where the dirt is. I mean, he's running his nail. One of the excuses they tell me is that they say he's got no nails. Well, he may not have, he had enough there to be trying to lift the seam. The other thing about that was, of course, he was the only one to swing it. Jacques Kallis does swing the ball a bit. He didn't swing it at all. Tendulkar did. Perhaps he was just having a good day as far as that's concerned. Guilty as can be of manipulating the ball, in my view. And therefore, I think Diness is totally justified.
Is it a silly question? Tell me if it is. I've no doubt you will. Is it because Sachin Tendulkar has been charged with this? In a roundabout way, I think it's a good thing for cricket because it really could stamp it out completely.
Well, it does. I mean, I think
his profile has brought that upon.
Yeah, Steve Waugh's point's well made. I mean, you know, it doesn't matter who you are. If you're caught doing something, and look, I'm beginning to question how smart Tendulkar is. I mean, the cameras are everywhere these days. I mean, it's the same as those microphones. You've got to be relatively careful, and you've got to take note of what the ICC is saying. I mean, they are obviously getting quite tough now, and therefore the players have been put on notice. They've got to be careful. Your point is well made. Yeah, I think that there will be a few more players a little bit more conscious of it, but as far as India are concerned, let me tell you that they feel very strongly about this. There have been headlines across India, talk about, you know, apartheid is live and well. They feel as if they're really being victimised down there. The other question, I think, you could see here, some of these protests. I mean, where else would this happen in the world? I mean, people actually getting out on the street and now starting to accuse the South Africans of racism. The guy that did this was Mike Diness. I mean, he's a Scotsman who now lives in Kent and used to captain England. But you can see how passionate. Now, even the little boy is getting out there. This guy is like the Beatles used to be to me when I was a kid. You know, he's bigger than Ben-Hur. But I tell you what does worry me, Simon, just a little bit. I'm a South African, as you know. They are not little angels either in Test match cricket. And the only worry I've got is I just find it hard to come to terms with how come there was just nothing on the other side. And I think that had there been, or if there has been, a little bit more of the nest going to the other side as well, and perhaps putting them on notice. You know, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It may well have happened. They may just have taken notice.
Are you saying that the Indian charges may not have been upheld if he hadn't have already warned them? So you think because they were upheld for the 4 fieldsmen and the captain, that he must have warned them prior?
Oh, I've got no doubt that they've been put on notice. I mean, I know, you speak to the Australian players, they've all got letters. They've all been put on notice that the match referees are going to come down hard on them. Dennis Lindsay, who's the match referee in South Africa, he was the first one to come out and say, you know, he's wrong, Diness is right. And, you know, yes, I just think that he's put them all on notice. He has done 9 matches involving India, by the way, and never reported a single player. So Mike Diness, I don't think, is going to go out his way to victimise the Indians. The Indians, however, see it a different way. And, of course, there's another bigger issue here, and that is the issue that goes a little bit deeper, that it's about administration. People have pointed a finger at India, I think, in some cases unfairly, especially the Brits. Diness is a Brit. We also have the South Africans who have pointed a finger up there when we had all that match-fixing stuff. We've had Dalmia, who, it's common knowledge, doesn't necessarily get on all that well with the new boss of the ICC, who's an Australian, Malcolm Gray. So, I mean, there are some factors in the background playing there, and there may just be a get square scenario out there as well.
Away from that, Mike Dinesh, should he have been at the press conference? Because he couldn't answer a question.
Yeah, that's just ridiculous. I mean, if you're going to... And that was Majola there. He's the chap who's taken over from Ali Bacha, the chap who was sitting next to him. I mean, you just don't go into those conferences if you've got nothing to say.
Well, he couldn't say anything.
It was just silly.
By rule, he couldn't say
Well, I don't actually believe that. I mean, common sense would have suggested that, look, you know, I'm coming to a conference, I want to answer your questions. He would have known it was going to be quite volatile. But, I mean, he just had to say. I mean, imagine if Mike Dinesh had stood up and said, look, I've been to 9 matches, I've never ever reported an Indian. Number 2, before the first test match, I had every single one of them in, captain, vice-captain, and all this. This is what I did. There were these incidents happened in the first test match. I brought the players in, I warned them. And if he'd been down this course, I mean, I think the journalists would have been a little bit more inclined to be a little bit more level-headed about it all.
Yeah, it was red rag or bull stuff when he wouldn't speak.
It was, and it's not over yet, because, I mean, now we're going to have to wait and see what the Indians do. The Indians could still pull their team out of South Africa.
Well, we will stay tuned. Thanks for that, and I reckon we'll be